A single confession shattered decades of silence out.
Yeah, and it freaked me out being surrounded by.
At 62, Julian Lennon stunned the world with just a few short words, "I truly hated her." A simple sentence, yet behind it lies a storm of emotions, pain, conflict, and layers of secrets that had never been revealed. This is a story of family, betrayal, fame, and survival, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about rock royalty. The kind of story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about rock royalty until now. But given the circumstances of a relationship and family environment, what could possibly make the son of a legendary musician carry a lifelong grudge? What could drive the son of a musical legend to carry a grudge for a lifetime? Today, you'll see a very different side of Julian Lennon, the man behind the spotlight, the truth no tabloid has ever touched. And it all began the moment he received the go-ahead for that fateful exhibition, the moment when long-buried secrets finally began to surface. Before the world knew him as the son of a legend, Julian Lennon was just a boy living in the overwhelming shadow of his father, yearning for something simple, something normal. From the outside, his childhood looked glamorous, glittering with the illusion of fame that came with a famous last name. People assumed that being a Lennon meant living a perfect life. But inside that house, happiness was a stranger. The day John Lennon walked out wasn't just the end of a family, it was the beginning of a lifelong emptiness. He left for another woman, abandoning Julian and his mother, Cynthia, in silence and confusion. No goodbye, no explanation, just absence. Cynthia held everything together, selling off family belongings piece by piece just to put food on the table. The fairy tale was over, replaced by cold reality, a small flat, second-hand clothes, and the uncertainty of what tomorrow might bring. Fame, for Julian, brought no comfort, only unanswered questions. At school, his last name made him a target. Other kids saw Lennon and assumed he had it all, but inside, he felt hollow and alone. They mocked him, bullied him, even hit him. Teachers looked the other way, believing the son of a superstar didn't need protection. Through it all, Cynthia was his only shield. A mother fighting to build a fragile wall between her child and a cruel, judgmental world. Julian learned early that legends only shine for those on the outside. For the ones who live in their shadow, the price is loneliness, not admiration. Yet he endured, hiding his pain behind a quiet strength, determined never to let the world see him fall apart. As he grew older, Julian was haunted by the image of a father the world adored, a man who preached peace and love, but gave little of either at home. While the crowd sang "Imagine," Julian saw only absence, broken promises, and a father he barely knew. The pain cut deeper each time he saw John shower affection on John Lennon, his younger half-brother, the son born into the love Julian never received. The media called John a devoted father, but to Julian, it felt like cruel irony. People heard John's songs and thought of hope and unity. But for Julian, those same melodies carried rejection and anger. Rumors whispered that John had once called him a mistake, while Sean was the child born out of love. Whether those words were exaggerated or not didn't matter, the scars were real, and every day they reminded Julian of one thing. He was different, and he was never really wanted. Oh, is it really you? That was the question Julian Lennon carried in his heart all his life, yet never received an answer to. Though his mother, Cynthia, tried to fill the emptiness, the pain never faded. Everywhere he looked, on posters, in songs, in documentaries, the image of John Lennon, the world's peace icon, was omnipresent. To the public, he was a legend. But to Julian, he was the man who had walked away from his first family. And as the years went by, that bitterness grew alongside him, quietly shaping the man he would become. The relationship between father and son was always strained and awkward. After the divorce, contact became rare and forced, a few obligatory phone calls, a handful of uncomfortable meetings, but nothing real, nothing that could heal. John poured his love into Sean, his younger son with Yoko Ono, making sure the world saw him as a devoted father. Meanwhile, Julian stood on the sidelines, watching from afar, trying to believe he still mattered, though deep down he always felt like an outsider. Moments of hope flickered and died, a guitar gifted here, a kind word there, and then silence for years. Julian longed for a real connection, a father's guidance, but those hopes were constantly shattered. Eventually, he stopped expecting anything. The father he needed was never coming back. So he built walls, armor forged from disappointment, to shield himself from more pain. Then came the day that changed everything. The news broke: John Lennon had been shot. The world went into mourning. Millions wept for a fallen hero. But Julian's grief was different, quieter, heavier. At that moment, he was just a young man, far from the chaos of the headlines, lost in his own sorrow. Only days before, he had spoken to his father, hearing a rare warmth in his voice, sensing a fragile chance for reconciliation. That small light of hope was extinguished in an instant. There was no funeral, no farewell. Yoko Ono announced there would be no public memorial. Only a call to honor John's dream of peace. Julian was left alone, surrounded by fragments of memory and regret. The last words he heard from his father echoed endlessly, not because they were profound, but because they marked the final end of any hope for healing. While the world cried for a legend, Julian cried for the father he never truly had. And the deepest wound came later, when John's will was read. Almost everything was left to Yoko Ono and Sean, with Julian barely mentioned at all. All those years he had spent yearning for his father's love ended in a single, cold document, one that confirmed his worst fear, that the man he had waited for all his life had never really seen him as a son. After John Lennon's death, everything, the estate, the music, the legacy, fell under Yoko Ono's control. Julian, the firstborn son, was left with only a small trust fund, a cold token rather than a gesture of love. But to him, this was never about money. It was about being erased from his own father's story, written out of the legend he should have been a part of. So Julian began his own battle, a fight for identity, pride, and recognition. He launched a long and exhausting legal struggle that lasted for years, filled with tense negotiations, sleepless nights, and endless tabloid headlines. Outsiders called him greedy, but to Julian, it was about reclaiming a piece of history that had been stolen from him. The eventual settlement was said to be substantial, yet no sum could ever mend the wounds of abandonment. Amid the legal war came the quieter, colder conflict, the one with Yoko Ono. She held all the power, the guardian of his father's memory, and the symbol of everything he had lost. Every public event between them was a performance, forced smiles hiding years of resentment. For nearly 2 decades, every negotiation, every interaction was a reminder that Yoko ruled the Lennon legacy, while Julian remained on the outside looking in. He resented her deeply, blaming her for much of his pain and for the father he never truly had. But time has a way of softening even the hardest hearts. Anger never brought peace. Gradually, small moments began to wear down the bitterness. A photography exhibit, an unexpected encounter, a mutual effort to keep peace for Sean's sake. The long, silent feud began to fade, replaced by a fragile truce. They would never be close, never a family, but Julian made a choice, not to fight anymore. Not for Yoko's sake, but for his own sanity, and for Sean. His bond with Sean became the anchor that kept him from sinking completely into resentment. They had grown up in different worlds, but pain forged a quiet connection between them. 4 years, distance and jealousy stood in the way, but as adults, they found common ground. Shared experiences, laughter, and a mutual need for understanding brought them closer. Sean's kindness and acceptance helped Julian see the truth, that holding on to hate only prolongs the pain. For the first time, Julian felt he truly belonged, not just to a famous name, but to something that resembled a family. The silent war with Yoko lost all meaning. What mattered now was protecting the bond he had with his brother. And through it all, Julian learned that peace doesn't always come with grand gestures. Sometimes, it's simply the quiet decision to let go and move forward. Breaking free from the Lennon name was never easy. Wherever he went, people saw only his father's shadow, comparing every note, every word, every step to a legend he could never live up to. Music, his first love, became a burden of expectation. The world didn't want a new artist. They wanted another John Lennon. But instead of breaking under that weight, Julian chose to reinvent himself, to create, to live, and to finally be his own person. Photography, writing, and his quiet personal projects became more than hobbies for Julian. They became his lifeline. In them, he rediscovered himself, no longer defined by his father's fame or the world's expectations. He stopped chasing approval and began to live on his own terms. The documentaries, the endless Beatles nostalgia, they would always remind him of where he came from. But for the first time, Julian refused to let that past control who he was becoming. Instead of trying to escape his father's shadow, he chose to honor it, through creativity, music, and a calm resilience that spoke louder than anger ever could. The Lennon name, once a burden, evolved into a legacy he carried with quiet pride. Julian's story isn't one of easy forgiveness or sudden redemption. It's one of slow healing, of learning to live with pain rather than erase it. When he once said, "I utterly hated her," the words carried decades of hurt, lost years, missed chances, and a family broken by choices they could never take back. Yet, through the cracks, Julian found something rare: peace. A fragile, hard-won truce with the past that allowed him to move forward. His journey reveals the unseen cost of fame, the illusion of perfect families, and the courage it takes to find your own voice in the shadow of a legend. If you've ever battled your past or struggled to forgive, Julian Lennon's path is a reminder that healing doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be real. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we uncover more untold stories behind Hollywood's most fascinating lives.